Hello, good morning everyone. Welcome to this live session. I'm Deepak Anupalli and I'm the co-founder and head of product engineering at Wavemaker. A little bit about my journey. I have been working on application software products for almost 2 decades, specializing in building Java EE and middleware based app server products and scalable application platforms. Almost a decade ago, with the eruption of cloud and social media and mobile applications. So what we have seen is the application development landscape went through a tectonic shift, and it demanded more expertise to build cloud and mobile applications. And way back, we realized most of the existing technology frameworks were not suitable for cloud native app development. So that gave way to the idea of Wavemaker, conceiving the idea of a product to help accelerate app development, at the same time reducing the expertise and skills which are required to be able to build really complex and cloud native applications using the low code paradigm. So today in this session, I would like to share some of our experiences being in the low code journey and knowing the product landscape, working with several customers. We're going to bring some of the experiences through our journey, especially if you are considering to move to low code. No matter where you are in your journey, whether you are evaluating low code platforms, it is very important to understand and ask some of these questions to be able to make a right choice for your low code platform. So let's first ask ourselves a key question. Are all low code platforms the same, right? So broadly, what we have seen from our experience, there are kind of three segments. The way how we look at low code platforms, there are no code platforms which are more suitable for business users to be able to build productivity applications, especially using spreadsheet kind of an automation apps or surveys, and where there is a lot of data and you have to quickly put an interface and roll out an application, right? So, and if you look at the amount of skills which are needed is very low, because these are completely non-technical users able to create apps using platforms. So the next bucket, if you see, the low code platforms for citizen development. So I think you hear a lot about these platforms in the market. There are a lot of players who are bringing in the workflow based application development approach to be able to create applications for various use cases, all the way from dashboards, creating inventory kind of applications, to several use cases. Again, these platforms require a low exposure to technology, and that's exactly what they are more suitable for citizen development use cases. So the third category is what we are interested in as Wavemaker, a low-code platform for professional developers, tackling in the development of enterprise applications, which have a lot of capabilities in terms of data integration, the size of the application, the ability to scale the apps for a large number of users, both from a web and mobile standpoint, right? So if you look at fundamentally, you may have an overlap in terms of the capabilities each of these platforms have or the kind of use cases they address. But definitely when you look at the kind of complexity they tackle, definitely as we move towards the enterprise app low-code platforms where developers have to put to use and build applications, the complexity is very high, right? So it is very interesting as we see the times we are in. Low-code platforms have moved just being measured in terms of productivity and the speed they bring. Today, low code is taking a strategic seat, in terms of being chosen for application development in enterprises, right? Today, more and more organizations are looking at using low code for their mainstream application development, modernization, right? And what we have seen, especially in the last 5 to 6 months since the COVID outbreak has started, and the pandemic is pushing the need to embrace low code, and it is very evident from the conversations we are having with several prospects. There is an unprecedented demand for building applications with low budgets. We hear that IT teams are really hard pressed in terms of time and budget to be able to build full stack teams and deliver these applications, right? So that is exactly where it is becoming more and more important to choose a low code platform which kind of really meets all of these needs across the board, especially in terms of aligning to the needs of the organization, in terms of having a clear strategy for aligning with the development standards. So organizations have evolved over time, building their own technology frameworks and building their own expertise within the organization. So a low code platform has to really fit into the organization, and that's exactly what we are going to talk about today in this session. What are these aspects based on which you need to evaluate a low code platform? Essentially, these are the questions you need to ask yourself and also the low code vendor. So as we see, the need for really bringing a low code as a center of application development for your organization. So it is very important to look at whether it is really appealing to your development teams. So most of the low code platforms emerged from a BPM background, and they have targeted business users and citizen developers alike to enable a workflow-based development methodology. These are more suitable for creating process automation and improving the efficiency of the way how business function through applications, right? So now today we are seeing low-code platforms are actually taking not just process automation kind of applications. We are seeing mainstream application development acceleration, and we are seeing legacy modernization, which could be pretty large initiatives within an organization, and low-code platforms are being considered to be able to handle these. And most important aspect here to note is from a survey conducted recently, what is evident is only 20% of the use cases in an organization need a low-code platform for citizen development. And predominantly, most of them are trying to use a low-code platform for their mainstream application development, right? And so if you are evaluating a platform, so not all platforms are same, right? Basically, you need different parameters to evaluate the platforms and based on your needs, right? If you are looking at adopting a low-code platform for your development teams, accelerating development, so you need to definitely look at the capabilities very closely. So there are certain aspects which we talk in the rest of the session, where most of the low-code platforms enabled citizen development kind of use cases, and when you are making a choice for your development teams, right, it is very important to look at how they fit into your organization, how they kind of flatten the learning curve in adopting the platform for your use cases, and essentially streamlining the development of across the organization. So these are some of the key things that you need to be looking at in evaluating, right? So it does low code platforms need to create real code. Is there real code? Can I actually see code? So most low code platforms do not emphasize on real code or the ability to produce developer readable or modifiable code, right? And this is a kind of a concern. And we know that no serious application can be built out of the box with factory made widgets or templates or components, right? And having code is very important. At least what we see is without code, your development teams are locked into the low code vendors components or software, or basically the entire tool set which they offer for development. And in the long run, it would lead to increased costs, and also it could challenge your teams from an intellectual property ownership kind of situation. Another key aspect is code ownership is key. Be it for customizing your application or extending it or maintaining it over long term, right? Having code and owning the code is a crucial aspect. And when we talk about our experiences working with some of our customers, we'll highlight the importance of having code and the ability to customize and really own stuff, right? The another key aspect is without code and without alignment to the existing tool set, there is total disruption of the tool set which has been already created within your organization. So be it in the application development lifecycle, right? Whether for testing, your teams would have already created a framework, embraced technologies like Selenium or load runner or existing tools to test your application. So a low-code platform should seamlessly integrate with the existing tool set, be it for testing or for deployment, right? Most low-code platforms don't offer, a flexible deployment model, and it is very important, right, to see whether you have the flexibility in terms of owning the code, customizing the code, as well as integrating with existing tool set, right? And leveraging open standards based technology stack brings the right amount of maturity for your software, because they have evolved and have been created over a period of time. And by using low code open standards based technology stack, you don't need to reskill or reinvent the wheel, right? So let's look at some of our experiences when we are working with the customers. We learned code behind has become absolute non-negotiable, right? The having the code and ownership for the code is key. When we are working with a large financial analytics company in North America, so what we have seen is there is a very stringent process for code analysis, for putting through the code using tools like checkmarks or sonar, or there are several tools which are available which will do a static and dynamic code analysis for vulnerabilities in the application code as well as the libraries. So these applications which are built by the customer are deployed to some of the top banks, and it is absolute non-negotiable to make sure the code analysis passes and then the application is delivered to the customer, right? So each and every artifact which is created by the low-code platform has to go through this kind of verification. And it is very important as a organization, when you are choosing a low-code platform, whether these kind of stringent hurdles can be passed with a low-code platform, right? In another use case, working with an auto insurance, a leading insurance provider, again in North America, who had a code generation system for motor insurance. So they have a legacy system already in place. A lot of business logic has been created over a period of time. And one of the challenges is to ensure that they extend or leverage the existing system and at the same time integrate with the new approach of building an application using the low-code platform. So creating an API layer or reusing the existing code and extending the code is very important, and the low-code platform has to provide the necessary controls to be able to do this level of modernization, right? So we'll talk about another important aspect. As you build applications, create several apps, and your apps are gaining traction. So scaling the applications and ensuring that they meet your growing user or organization needs is very important, right? So one of the things about scaling application is application scalability is deep rooted into the architecture of the application. So a lot of elements define the ability to scale your application. It is the architecture, it is the technology stack which is used. So each and every layer of your application defines whether it can scale uh, in terms of addressing the needs for users, growing users, or the amount of data the application can handle, or you may add so many capabilities over time. Your application is really growing and becoming large, so you will have to make sure that it is also scaling, right? So this is where embracing a microservices kind of an approach, it is inevitable. Like anytime you hear about application scalability and large scale applications, you hear about microservices. And for low code platforms, it's no exception. And if you are building applications using a low code platform, if they have to scale, the platform fundamentally has to bring elements of microservices, the ability to create services with an API layer and decoupling the front end and the back end using a well-defined REST API layer are very much needed to be able to scale your applications, right? And not just that, as you start building your application, naturally the application grows, the amount of features and capabilities grow. So you should have the right amount of control in the platform to be able to separate the services, right? To break up into multiple services, kind of make the interaction between these services using API. So your development teams need the right amount of controls in the platform to be able to do all that, right? And as we see, it is one aspect is the architecture, and we talked about the technology stack, which is used also influences the scalability, right? uh, from a runtime point of view, once your application goes live, leveraging the right infrastructure also becomes very important. And that's exactly where today we hear about containerization, the ability to use containers for horizontally scaling and expanding your application footprint. So you have to see that your application really can be horizontally scaled. So to horizontally scale applications on container infrastructure, there are certain golden rules in terms of using the persistent storage for the entire data persistence. You cannot store anything in memory, right? Basically, the application has to adhere to certain architectural principles to be able to scale for large number of users and leverage the container or any scalable infrastructure, right? And having the flexibility in your deployment model is a very crucial aspect. So you may wanted to deploy on public cloud infrastructure or your own on-prem infrastructure, or infrastructure which supports containerization, be it Kubernetes or your own kind of a containerization platform, right? So the low-code platform should be able to meet your infrastructure needs. So let's look at some of the use cases, especially when we are building long-lived applications. The apps have to scale both in terms of the number of users and also the amount of data that they can handle. So in one use case where not only we have built a customer-facing mobile application, which is available in the App Store. So the application is a large, recruitment portal which connects kind of people who are looking for jobs and the employers. So it is more of a recruitment portal which has to scale to many organizations and many number of users, and absolutely right from the start when the application goes live, it has to scale to be able to meet the creators vision for making the application very successful, right? In one more very interesting use case, this is kind of been very exciting to talk about, an application built to help save deforestation in Africa. A mobile app has been built to kind of track the life cycle of a tree, basically when it is cut and exported. So the organization wanted to streamline the kind of ability to track at each stage. And so what happens is a mobile application has been built to go and enumerate the trees which are growing, the trees which are cut, and they can enumerate the logs. So basically we are talking about huge amount of data being collected using just a mobile device, and there are hundreds of workforce and millions of trees being enumerated, and the application has to scale to such large kind of user base as well as the amount of data. So coming back to another important aspect when you are looking at low-code platforms, security is utmost important. And be it you are creating a internal application for your employee use, or creating an app which you deploy outside the firewall and make it available for users, or an application which is collecting a lot of user data, security is, of primary importance. And again, just like the way we saw scalability goes deep rooted into the application architecture, security also is kind of built into the layers of the application. And the architecture defines the right amount of security for your application. And the important thing is understanding enterprise security, and data governance is very hard, and it takes a lot of time to be able to make sure your application is fully secure to go live. And this is an interesting data point. What we heard from analysts, especially those who are looking at how long it takes for an application go live in a large enterprise. So typically it takes 8 to 12 months after an application has developed to clear the IT compliance and governance policies. So that could go as long as you ensure that it completely clears from a compliance standpoint. So this is an interesting aspect. Why? Because application security is not just kind of deep rooted into the architecture. There are several factors which influence the right amount of security, the changing requirements, right, and how long it takes to kind of clear from a compliance standpoint. So let's look at some of the aspects from a security standpoint. So if you see, we talked about application security is not just a switch that you can just enable and then, okay, your application becomes secure. It is deep rooted into several layers of your application. So there are database layer, there is the API layer, and there is the UI layer. So at each layer, you have to ensure your application gives the right amount of protection against the data and vulnerabilities which could exist in any of these layers, right? And especially when you are looking at a low-code platform to build applications, right? So the platform should have the ability to integrate with existing security infrastructure, which is already there in the organization, be it an identity management system or a single sign-on system. So the applications have to seamlessly integrate with these security infrastructure elements, and also provide the right level of control to the developers to be able to onboard users, to be able to create new roles and create the right levels of access control in the application. So that is very crucial. Another very interesting data point. So typically a web application has somewhere around 50 to 60 third-party open source libraries, right? Especially if you are looking at a web application built using open standards based technology stack. So it is very important to make sure each and every library and each and every framework which is used in your application is completely vulnerability free. And this is essentially the key aspect of the penetration testing. And so imagine that if your development teams were to ensure, this level of stringent verifications. So it takes a lot of time. So there's a bit of onus on the low-code platform to ensure that each and every aspect of the application is secure. The libraries are completely vulnerability, kind of checked, and your developer then kind of relies on the low-code platform to be able to build applications without the nuances of you know the libraries and overall security, right? So freeing off your development teams from these nuances is another responsibility of a low-code platform, right? And we talked about the compliance aspect, where most of the time and effort goes in ensuring it clears the compliance aspect. So the access control mechanisms which are provided and aligning it to the existing security infrastructure is very crucial, right? So, from our experiences working with some of the large organizations, especially when we were working with an organization who is a leader in financial services, and they are kind of creating application software, and mostly they are creating banking solutions and delivering it to some of the top banks. And as we know that at banks, basically there are several compliance kind of norms which these application software has to kind of meet. And these banks also have geography specific demands in terms of security, which have to be really kind of looked at. Using the open standards-based technology stack, which is the approach which our customer has taken, a complete open standards approach with an API-enabled architecture, which gives them the maximum flexibility to be able to deploy and deliver these applications and completely secure. And this is exactly where a low-code platform is not a black box where everything is taken care and you deliver application as a black box. Each and every layer has to be clearly visible to the organization and throughout the process of ensuring the right amount of security for your applications, right? And in another use case, where we were working with a social security bank based out of Caribbean islands, and here leveraging the existing security infrastructure is crucial, because this bank has been using some SQL Server based authentication mechanism, and it is a must that the low-code platform has to integrate with it, and every application has to make sure it uses the existing security infrastructure, right? Integrating with that, we talked about how it is important to integrate with existing identity systems, onboard users and roles becomes a crucial part of how the low-code platform is resilient to integrate with existing systems. And since the system has evolved over a period of time, it is considered to be secure enough so that when you are building applications, so you can rely on the existing security infrastructure, right? And not only that, when working with this customer, we kind of had an opportunity to integrate with several systems, a face recognition API to authenticate and authorize several users who have social security policies, insurance policies, and a lot of crucial data is being shared to the bank from the customer, and it is very important for the bank to secure all this information, right? So as you can see, we are not just talking about in-house applications for internal productivity and kind of workflow and process automation. So we are basically talking about applications which are built and delivered to your customers, consuming a lot of customer data, integrating with your existing security infrastructure, which is set up in the organization. So these are the critical elements which have to be looked at, especially when you are choosing a low-code platform. And basically, that is the crucial aspect, right, in terms of choosing the right low-code platform. So let's look at another aspect. We talked about having code. We talked about having the right controls for scaling your application. We talked about the right secure infrastructure. So if you are using a low-code platform to help modernize your existing infrastructure or creating applications as part of your digital transformation journey, right? So there are several aspects from the point of risk, right? How do you minimize risk with a low-code platform? Or, does it really reduce the risk if you are using a low-code platform for your modernization efforts? Yes, it is true, right? So how the risk is reduced is, most of the times we see the modernization effort as, okay, you change everything, completely rebuild stuff and create new architecture, new infrastructure and new application is not the way how you have to see modernization is. Modernization is mostly coexisting and reusing a lot of existing infrastructure and creating newer ways of interacting with the existing data and existing processes and capabilities which are already available in the organization. So from a reuse standpoint, you will have to look at whether the low-code platform gives you the right levels of control to be able to integrate with your existing, be it databases or ERP or CRM systems. Okay, these systems could have very old way of integrating. They could probably expose APIs as SOAP web services, or they could simply have code-based APIs. Some of them may not have any APIs. It is very important to see that you have to leverage or reuse some of these existing assets, right? And that's very important to be able to reuse and accelerate your digital transformation journey. And another important aspect is in terms of modernization, what we have experienced is in large organizations, modernization is not just carried out by a small team or an in-house team, but typically there will be several players. So there could be an in-house IT team, You could be working with a partner who is providing you the necessary or essential services to be able to modernize. So when you have an ecosystem of developers who are working on modernization efforts, it is very important to see there is good alignment in terms of development practices. We talked about the alignment in terms of the tool set and practices and uh, giving the ability to accelerate. And a platform-driven approach gives you the boost, and of course, it reduces the risk also because you are not too much dependent on individual skills, and partner and several aspects could actually bring down the risk for these modernization efforts, right? Not only that, important aspect is by taking a platform-led approach, you are empowering your own IT to have full control over how application is created, how these API layers are created, how the deployment functions. So totally, you have a kind of alignment in terms of the overall modernization, approach that you have taken by leveraging a low-code platform. So let's talk about a few use cases. It sounds, kind of very rosy, but in terms of putting it to use and actually seeing the benefits of using a low-code platform for modernization efforts. So what we have learned is while working with a healthcare organization based out of New Jersey, and especially they had a pressing need to roll out application with within a very short amount of time. So basically, delivering in time was the major concern, or essentially the platform has to mitigate the risk of delivering the applications very fast. So the challenge was there were a lot of systems in use in the organization for their medical systems. So there is Athena Health, there is Medicare. So all of these systems have data, and the new application which is going to be built has to integrate with these systems, pull out data, and create a mobile application which their staff as well as patient can use. Especially with the pandemic, there was a need to kind of roll out several applications, including a bed management system for COVID. All of this happened in a very short time frame. Using a low-code platform, they were able to create these multiple applications, and also to minimize the time it takes to publish an app to the App Store. So they had to use a mechanism where multiple apps are actually put into a common aggregator kind of an application using Spot queues as a platform, which will kind of cut down the amount of time it takes to publish an application to the App Store. So in another use case in terms of reducing the risk for your modernization efforts while working with a company based out of Australia who are in the waste management and waste collection kind of industry. So this organization had several vendors, partners who they work with, and in fact several thousands of vendors across the region. And it is very important to create certain applications where they ease out the way how vendor registration happens. And they have a lot of trucks which collect the waste, and they have to do recycling. So they have a lot of infrastructure and a lot of systems in place. So they were able to build a lot of applications with a very small IT team. So the risk we are running here in this modernization effort is the team is small and the team has limited capabilities. Team don't have people with mobile application experience, but they have to create mobile applications where they can track their vehicles, track the transport, and several aspects, right? So using a low-code platform can bring a lot of things into place with a small team. It could boost the skills right, with a minimal technology understanding in terms of building mobile applications using the low-code paradigm. The organization was able to create applications and roll out for their partners. Some of these applications are 24/7, and in fact, these applications are deployed onto their own infrastructure. Also from a deployment standpoint, having the right controls to be able to deploy the applications on your infrastructure, manage it, and run it for operational efficiency is very important, right? So, so this is about reducing the risk for your modernization efforts by using a low-code platform. So this is the last aspect we are going to talk about, the licensing model that a low-code platform offers have to really be important, and it is very important to look the licensing model not just from a development point of view. So there are several phases of application lifecycle development to the way how you test your application using multiple environments and multiple roles in your organization, and also you deploy it and maintain the application in terms of runtime. So there has been a lot of debate in terms of the way low-code platforms are priced. Some of them, are kind of we keep hearing from our prospects and customers who have used low-code platforms in the past and who are again evaluating for different needs. So a lot of platforms offer a very complex pricing model, which is very difficult for you to kind of understand, especially when you are going through and evaluating low-code platform from an end-to-end life cycle, all the way from development to deployment, right? And most of them claim they are very expensive as you really scale your applications. So choosing the right strategy or having the understanding of how the pricing works and how different platforms offer their pricing is very important. What we have learned from our experiences, there are platforms which will offer pricing based on applications, based on the number of users who are actually using the applications, based on the number of business objects. So there are several criteria, right? And also including the number of developers who are actually building the application. So the pricing model varies across the board. And what is important is from a licensing model standpoint, as you scale your applications, you shouldn't be worried about low-code platform costs, right? So ideally, you should pick an approach where even when you scale and as your number of users are growing, the platform cost should not incrementally or exponentially grow, right? And what we hear is there is some amount of disproportionate licensing model where you are building simple applications and delivering it to a large number of users, and the pricing is very high just because you are delivering it to a large number of users. On the other hand, if you're building a very complex application, but for a small set of users, the pricing is different. So there shouldn't be too much of disparity in terms of the way how pricing works for different scenarios, right? And so this is exactly where you need to be very particular about what is the use case that you are using or going to use the low-code platform. And you have to look at the budgets which are allocated for your applications and choose the right approach for your applications. In essence, there are several elements we have talked about so far. Making an informed decision in picking the low-code platform of your choice is very important. We talked about several aspects in terms of aligning to your development teams, having code, right? Having real code. We talked about how it is important to have code without disrupting your existing tool set, ability to scale apps at ease, the right controls for security, and building applications for the future, right? So low code based development and typically the way how you see low code as, okay, there is visual drag and drop. Okay, I have a nice editor where my teams can build applications. We can use workflows to be able to connect data into the interface, and there are several aspects of low code. All of these are just a tip of the iceberg. Beneath the surface, when you look at applications having to withstand the scalability needs, security, and especially kind of clearing the compliance requirements of your organizations. So these become very important, not those which you typically see on the surface. So in essence, what lies under the hood makes a lot of difference, right, for the low-code platform. So that's pretty much what we wanted to cover today. I would now like to hear more about your journey, and probably a few questions which we can address as we go to the next step.
Yeah. So we have a few questions, Deepak. Thank you for the session. We'll start off with this one. The first one is, all low-code platforms claim to have open code experience. How is it possible to tell if the code is really open?
Okay, so yeah, that's a good question. So most of the platforms claim low-code experience, right? That's what you have mentioned.
Yeah,
Um,
open code experience. Yeah.
yeah, I think, having the ability to see the code is one aspect. So we talked about multiple things. So the transparency for what code gets generated through the platform is important, right? Why? Because I would like to customize. I would like to enhance, beyond what the platform offers, right? So the ability to customize is one aspect, but it is very important that this capability should be standards based. That means a developer with minimal understanding of how the platform is built and the nuances of the platform, they should be able to use an open standards approach to be able to extend, right? That means fundamentally the platform has to take a complete open standards based approach architecturally, as well as the way how the various elements of the application layers are created have to be standards based, so that it is very easy from an open code experience standpoint. So different platforms offer different levels of the open code experience. There are platforms which consider the whole application as a black box, but they give the right hooks. Okay, if you would like to extend this aspect, okay, you have this hook. I mean, so that is one way of looking at it, but we are talking about holistically from an architecture and end to end, it should offer an open, standards based experience.
Okay. Okay. We have one question around deployment. Is it possible to deploy to multi-cloud or leverage Kubernetes while using low code?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, this is where we hear as we speak to a lot of prospects, and we see that, especially since last year, we hear a lot of our customers asking for, can we deploy these applications onto a Kubernetes-based infrastructure, right? And see, leveraging container infrastructure is key when you are scaling your application. So not everybody may need to, deploy on Kubernetes or, container-based infrastructure, but it becomes inevitable when you have to scale for a large number of users, especially your application really grows for, users, or from a data standpoint, right? And having this ability is crucial if you are building complex and scalable applications.
Okay. Okay. This one's a little bit more WaveMaker focused. Does WaveMaker allow citizen developers to add validation logic to UI components without writing the actual code for it?
Yeah, so that's a good question. And so the validation logic is at various levels. So if you take a simple form, typically that is where in a UI component you would need validation, right? So in Waymaker, you can set up simple validation rules. In fact, in the editor, in Studio itself, you can set up simple field-based validations, what we call it, right? So you can write a field is so and so value greater than, or you can write expressions, both operator conditional expressions, right? And one level further down, you could actually write JavaScript based validation code also for the UI widgets in WayMaker, where if the complexity of validations becomes huge, then you may have to write them in simple JavaScript, readable JavaScript logic.
Okay. Okay. One on
So
pricing.
one another important aspect what we have seen is typically if you are using a flow-based approach for writing validation, right?
Hmm.
As the complexity of the rule increases, it is very difficult to manage a flow-based validation, and we have experienced this working with real customers, right? When typically the validation rules will become very big as time passes. The amount of validation that is put into these forms is really enormous, and having a simple code-based validation approach scales better in the long run, and it's more readable.
Okay. Okay. All right. Should I expect heavy runtime costs while deploying using low code?
So it varies based on the platform you have picked. So there are platforms who charge based on the application usage because they kind of offer deployment as a service. So you can deploy to their infrastructure, and basically you are charged based on how much infrastructure or whatever the elements of your application, right, which are measured. So it varies, and yes, if you are choosing a platform which actually licenses based on the number of applications you have built or the number of users who are going to use your application, so your costs could exponentially grow or grow along with the scale of your application, right? So it is very important to choose the right platform where you have the right controls to deploy applications, maybe in your own infrastructure, so that you can manage the application. So it is kind of the choice that you make, in terms of picking the right local platform.
Okay, depends on the platform. Okay.
Yes.
What is the typical team size and what skill sets are needed to work with Waymaker?
So I will kind of have to talk from our experience. So typically, most of the application teams we have seen at our customer end, there are very small teams, right? And we have also experienced when there is a large modernization where you are actually rebuilding or re-architecting a very complex application. We have seen multiple people and large teams with different roles participating in the application development. So we talked about these multiple layers, right, in which you can envision building applications using our low-code platform. So you would typically see people with UI specific skills, those who can bring some design and ability to think from a UI standpoint. And the next layer is we see enterprise architects and enterprise developers bringing their expertise in integrating with systems, writing complex business logic, and creating a solid middle layer, and possibly sometimes they would create their own APIs so that the application can leverage these APIs to integrate and build the application. And then going down, we see folks from DevOps who are actually deploying these applications and managing as they scale these apps, right? So these are the three categories of skill set which is needed. And in terms of since the application stack that we use is open standards based, so we attract Java developers, Angular, those who have built applications. They don't need to know Angular and other complex stacks. So simple Java, JavaScript based understanding, if they have, they can go a long way in using Waymaker to build applications.
Okay. How much complexity can Wavemaker handle regarding the design and animation that an application may require?
Yeah, so absolutely, Waymaker application development can go far. Why? Because there are essential levels of controls. So we are talking about delivering consumer banking kind of applications using Waymaker. We talked about job portal applications. We talked about partner registration portals, code generation systems, and portals. So all of these are the fundamental aspect here is to deliver the best experience from a design standpoint. So we can take any kind of design mock which is created by the organization, and we can completely replicate using Waymaker.
Okay. Okay. This is the last one. What kind of ROI can I expect if I shift to low-code app development? I mean, any stats we can give or from our experiences?
Okay, great. So yeah, so ROI is, it varies, right? Again, we talked about initially, applications with varied complexity, right? You have simple productivity applications to applications which demand, a lot of data integration, scalability. So, irrespective of the complexity, we can gain the minimum ROI being 70% of time saving and whatever the other aspects in terms of faster delivery. To it goes all the way to 3x, 4x kind of depending on the size and complexity of your application. So that's what from our past experiences with the customer studies that we have done in looking at how much time it took and how many developers were put to use to build these applications, so we could arrive at some of these ROI numbers. Thanks everyone for joining the session today. Hope we were able to kind of bring clarity in terms of how you go about choosing the right low-code platform for your development needs. Thanks again.